for children with disabilities. This morning, I just got off the phone with his mother, Kathy Lewis. Since 2017, her 25-year-old daughter has required care 24 hours a day. She is at home now. She's not in a facility. But now the state wants to cut that care by 8 hours. She's not sure why this is happening.
Is that legislation you're talking about?
She just got a letter from the Agency for Persons with Disabilities.
Can you show me the letter so we can look at it?
The letter, but what would you tell this mother?
Well, I want to see it. I mean, what happens is, if there's a bureaucratic issue, we want to come in and try to help people out. And so if you get that to us, we will absolutely work. I know the legislature is working on different things. We've had issues. I mean, there's been a huge increase in Medicaid, of course, but the reimbursements are low, so those are going to go up because it's harder to get people, and folks need care. So you're going to see, I think, some issues with the legislature in terms of that. But that particular case, if you get us that, I will talk to the agency and we'll see what we can do.
The abortion ban bill is on the floor of the Senate today. I spoke with Senate President Wilton Simpson over the summer. He's a big supporter of this $8 million for a long-acting contraception program. A lot of health experts and doctors feel like that's the best way to cut down on abortions is by reducing unwanted pregnancies. I'm wondering if you agree with that approach and if you plan to veto that program as you did last year.
I don't recall that, to be honest with you, so I'd have to look and see and get back to you.
In terms of the State of the Union, I know you said you fell asleep before it ended, but is there any parts of it you did agree with that you heard?
I think I'd have to think about some of the stuff. Well, I agree. If you think about what they've done, Fauci is in the witness protection program now. They don't want him out. They've never supported any. If you listen to them, they never supported all these policies that were so destructive. Now it's like, we all want to be like Florida all of a sudden, and nothing has changed. There's been no change in the underlying science. The ineffectiveness of those policies was apparent long ago. The destructiveness of those policies was apparent long ago. And they were the ones that were dipping their nose into Florida's business last summer, saying that 2-year-old kids needed to be forced masked when they leave the house, saying that school children had to wear masks for 8 hours a day. Now they act like that was something they didn't support, and they're saying that you don't do it. They actually said 2 weeks ago that everyone at the speech had to have an N95 mask. Then they changed it. How did the science change in 2 weeks? It changed. It didn't change. They changed that because they knew it would be a terrible visual to have all these people there suffering in mass, socially distant, while the rest of the country is out living their lives. And so I'm glad that I think it was because of politics. I don't think this was a legitimate conversion. I think they're getting negative polling, and I think most Americans associate these never-ending restrictions with their administration and like-minded governors and mayors. And it's interesting because for every governor or mayor that takes restrictive action, mandate, lockdown, almost all say, critical of Florida. How many of them end up on vacation in Florida over the last year and a half? And there's a lot that many of you know, but I can tell you there's even more that haven't been made public because people tell me these things because, they work at like a resort, and they're like, wait a minute, if I was working in their state, I'd have been shut down, and yet they come down here and they're enjoying all this stuff. So I'm glad that they have pivoted off of it. I think it's been really damaging, and I think you're going to continue to see problems with what we're seeing with some of the school children, how they were treated in a lot of these different parts of the country. I mean, can you imagine, like, you're in Chicago or Los Angeles or some of these places, and you can't get your kid in school for the entire year last year? Or you'd go in one day a week? And then forget about all the mitigation once you're in school. But that is a huge, huge thing. That's going to have huge ramifications far into the future. And they were responsible for doing that. We stood up for kids in Florida. We stood up for parents. We stood up for education because we thought it was important. And I think our kids are going to be much better off than a lot of these kids in these other states. And even to that day last night, you have them saying no masks in the Capitol, which I support, but then they're still forcing kids in elementary school in certain parts of the country to do this. And so I'm glad that the conversion has happened. I don't think it's necessarily genuine. I think it's more driven by political science. But here's, I think, the stakes for just people in Florida and throughout the country. You know, once we get through that midterm election, I think people that are of that mindset will probably look to clamp down again. And so the only way you could be sure that your freedoms are going to be respected is to make sure that you're supporting people who have demonstrated a record of actually supporting your freedoms. Yes, sir.
So what are we going to do? What are Republicans going to do to demonstrate that they get what time it is in America? That they get that there's $32 trillion in debt? That they get that our borders are wide open, and that's not a political campaign speech. It's a reality. Even Democrats who refuse to acknowledge that our border is wide open are panicked over Title 42 ruling by a district judge, because even Democrats who want to ignore the 230 or 40,000 apprehensions in October, the 70-something thousand gotaways, the 27 migrants, they ignore all that. But that's 7,000 or 8,000 a day, and they can just sort of barely process that. You get rid of Title 42, which, by the way, there's no pandemic reason for Title 42 right now. It's literally a Band-Aid that Democrats are using as a, oh my God, if we actually open up the borders entirely, we can't deal with 17,000 a day. But that's the truth. That's the reality. So what are my colleagues on this side of the aisle going to do about it? Oh, Chip, we'll pass a bill in January. I don't know, it'll be H.R. 1, H.R. 2, H.R. 5, but don't worry, we'll pass a border security bill. Well, one, I'll believe that when I see it. We don't have a great track record. Two, so what? Are you going to pass that bill and walk over and convince that great stalwart of defense of our border, Mitt Romney, that he should vote for it? You going to convince any of the 12 who just decided to redefine marriage and stomp all over religious liberty over in the United States Senate? Are you going to convince any one of them to vote for a strong border security bill? And even if you do you think that Joe Biden is going to sign it? So the question for Republicans is, are you willing to use the power of the purse articulated by our founders in Federalist 58 and broadly at our founding to stop what is happening in the destruction of our sovereignty with wide open borders that are endangering migrants in Texas, having poured into our schools? Or are you going to just continue the fraud that is the United States House of Representatives? Because that's what it is. We don't represent anything at all when it comes to the core values of the American people. We represent power. We represent the quest for power. Are we going to use the power of the purse to secure the border? Are we going to deal with the National Defense Authorization Act that is currently being negotiated and likely passed out of the United States Senate and sent over to the House of Representatives? Now, it's hard to hear the Republican leader, Mr. McCarthy, say that he thinks maybe the NDAA ought to be pushed into the next Congress. I agree with that. But then what? Then what? Is the Senate going to pass the same thing right back over? An NDAA that is chock full of all sorts of non-truly defense-related matters? We're going to have an NDAA that's sent over to us that drafts our daughters without so much as a single debate here on the floor about what it means to actually add our daughters to selective service?
Hello, everyone up there on the board. I want to thank you, all of you, for joining today. I just got back from an overseas trip where I spoke in Egypt at the COP27 the United Nations Climate Conference. And then to the leaders of the ASEAN countries in Cambodia. We also met with Indo-Pacific allies, including a trilateral meeting with Japan and the Republic of Korea, and with President Xi in Bali, as well as leaders of the G20 and the countries with many of the largest economies in the world. It was clear to me, and I think to most people in those meetings, that the United States is as well or better positioned than any nation in the world to lead the world on the economy in the years ahead. And there's a strong sense from all the leaders of the world of the strength of the American economy, and we've seen the willingness to want to work together and also here at home. We had an extraordinary 2 years of progress from the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act. But what I'm most excited about is that people are starting to see the impact of these legislative achievements in their own lives. We're just getting started. We passed them this year, but now they're really going to kick into effect. It's going to accelerate in the months ahead. And the implementation of these legislative achievements is going to be one of the key parts of the success, I believe, for the economy. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring us together today. You know, I've called together a group of labor leaders and business leaders to discuss progress in building the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. And they've been partners in creating the jobs of the future and in building a world-class workplace ready to compete to fill those jobs. And our approach, I believe, is working. The economy grew at 2.6% last quarter, while inflation started to slow and unemployment stayed low. But what do these economic statistics really mean to people? Well, here's what they mean, in my view. We've added jobs every single month of my presidency, more than 10 million jobs total. 700,000 of them were manufacturing jobs. Inflation at the grocery store is coming down slightly. Prices for things like clothes and television and appliances are going down as well as we head into the holidays. This week we saw the growth in prices in business pay for goods and services to come down as well. Gas prices are down. But it's going to take time to get inflation back to normal levels as we keep our job market strong so we could see setbacks along the way. I don't doubt that, but thus far we're in good shape. But we're laser focused on that. And in 6 short weeks, Americans are going to start to feel the effects of the Inflation Reduction Act. Come January 1st, seniors with diabetes on Medicare are going to pay no more than $35 a month for a prescription of insulin. Some pay as much as $400 a month now. And this matters to folks like Bob, who lives in Long Island, who has had diabetes for nearly 50 years. And he's had a leg amputated and has issues with eyesight because of the complications of his diabetes. Bob came to the White House a few months ago and talked about how he has to pay $300 out of pocket every 90 days for his insulin. Now, he won't have to choose that beginning January 1st, paying for a trip choosing between a trip to see his grandkids or to pay for his insulin in order to survive. This matters. There are millions of folks like Bob across the country. People are going to get a little more breathing room come January 1st. And for every Bob, there's a person who won't have to pay $100 or as much as $200 for shingles anymore. Come January 1, seniors on Medicare Part D will get the recommended like shingles for free, no copay. All this matters. Right now, 4 out of 5 folks who sign up for health insurance through the Affordable Care Act can get health care coverage for $10 a month or less. These lower rates were set to expire on January 1st of this coming year, but instead we were able to extend them. You need health insurance. You can sign up for those lower rates right now. Just go to healthcare.gov. Already we've seen a nearly 40% increase in new signups over last year. We're also helping folks save money on their energy bills. Starting January 1, you can get up to $3,200 tax credit to make your home more energy efficient. You can get up to $600 tax credit for new windows, $500 for new doors, $2,000 to install a heat pump, $600 to replace electric panels. Here's what this means. If you're living in a home with a drafty windows and doors starting January 1, you'll be able to save up to $1,100 in the cost of replacing them. And that's just on the upgrade. You're also going to save a lot of money going forward because your utility bills will be lower. And that's good for your wallet, but it's also good for the environment because you're using less energy. And that's not all. If you want to install solar panels on the roof, you can get a tax credit for 30% of the cost. It'll bring down the cost of installation by about $7,500. And when you get to keep savings money on your electric bills for the remainder of the year, it's about $300 a year on average. Look, if you switch to electric pump to heat your home, you can get a tax credit covering up to $2,000 of the cost. But that heat pump's going to save you hundreds of dollars a year on your energy bills, depending on where you live and what kind of heating system you rely on today. Look, we're talking about real money here to save people, and it's just going to start kicking in now. By taking action, we're making real progress in strengthening and stabilizing our economy, giving Americans across the country some breathing room. To build on this progress is not just acting, but it's listening. That's why I'm here today to open to good ideas to continue bringing inflation down and continue creating an economy that works for everyone with these business and labor leaders who are in front of me here. Folks in this room, American labor unions, American companies, are key to building an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, as I said. I look forward to continuing to partner with them and hearing their thoughts about things I should do and should not do, ways we can continue to strengthen the American economy, and about how we can work together going forward.